In 1989, a mycologist named Paul Stamets published something that the agricultural industry quietly hoped most people would never read. It was a cultivation manual, unassuming, spiral-bound, passed between researchers and foragers and underground growers who understood what was actually inside it. What it described was a production system so efficient, so space-independent, so disproportionate in its returns, that anyone who implemented it correctly could generate the income of a small farm from the square footage of a spare bedroom. We are not talking about a hobby. We are not talking about growing a few shiitakes on a log in your backyard. We are talking about a stacked, climate-controlled indoor production system that generates between $50,000 and $200,000 per year from spaces most people use for storage. And the reason you have never heard this explained clearly, the reason no one at your school, your bank, or your government extension office ever walked you through it, is the same reason Fan Lee's fish pond treatise disappeared from Western agriculture for 1,000 years. Not because it doesn't work, because it works too well. By the time this video ends, you will understand exactly how the system operates, what the numbers actually look like, and why a spare room, a garage, or a basement might be the most productive piece of real estate you already own. But first, you need to understand what this knowledge is and where it came from. Mushroom cultivation is not new. The Chinese were growing auricularia, wood ear mushrooms, on logs as early as 600 AD. By the Song dynasty in the 10th century, a farmer named Wu Sangquang had documented a reliable inoculation technique for shiitake on oak logs, a method so precise that versions of it are still used today. Japanese cultivators refined these techniques through the Edo period. By the 1600s, shiitake production was a significant rural industry, communities harvesting hundreds of pounds per season from managed forest plots, with yields that dwarfed anything their neighbors were producing from grain. The system spread slowly through Southeast Asia, embedded in agricultural traditions that treated mushrooms not as a curiosity, but as a primary crop, a calorie-dense, protein-rich, medicinally significant crop that required no tillable land, no irrigation infrastructure, and almost no external inputs beyond the agricultural waste that farms were already producing. When Western agricultural scientists finally began studying commercial mushroom production in earnest in the 1970s and 80s, what they found in those Asian operations stopped them. Yields per square foot that exceeded virtually every other food crop on Earth. A Pennsylvania button mushroom farm could generate more revenue per acre than a Midwest corn operation could dream of, and it required no acres. It required a building. The USDA published reports. University extension programs noted the economics. And then, the same thing happened that always happens when a system threatens the existing food supply chain. The knowledge got quietly filed away, not banned, not suppressed with any dramatic conspiracy, just unfunded, underpromoted, left to circulate among a small community of growers who understood what they had stumbled into. Because the moment you understand the math of indoor mushroom production, you stop looking at real estate the way you used to. Let's slow down here, because this is where most people's brains need a minute to catch up. Conventional agriculture operates on thin margins, measured in dollars per acre. A successful wheat operation might return $300 to $500 per acre annually. Corn, in a good year, might reach $700 per acre. Even premium specialty crops like blueberries or hops, which represent the high end of traditional farming, top out around $5,000 to $15,000 per acre in a strong market. Now listen to this carefully. A well-managed indoor oyster mushroom operation running on vertical racks in a 10-foot by 10-foot room, 100 square feet, can produce 800 to 1,200 pounds of mushrooms per year at a wholesale price of $6 to $8 per pound. That is $4,800 to $9,600 per year from 100 square feet. At farmers market or direct-to-restaurant retail pricing of $12 to $18 per pound, that same 100 square feet generates $9,600 to $21,600 annually. Convert that to an acre. 1 acre is 43,560 square feet. An indoor oyster mushroom operation at those yields and retail prices produces the per acre equivalent of $4 million to $9 million a year. No other agricultural system on Earth produces those numbers. Not vineyards, not greenhouses, not hydroponic lettuce operations charging a premium at Whole Foods. Nothing comes close. And the entry cost to start is not a farm loan. It is not a land purchase. It is not a decade of apprenticeship. The startup cost for a functioning small-scale operation is $500 to $3,000, depending on your existing space and ambition. This is the math they don't put in the agriculture curriculum. This is what Stamets understood when he wrote that spiral-bound manual. The system doesn't require land. It requires biology. And biology, once understood, is cheap. The indoor mushroom system is not complicated, but it is precise. Every element serves a function. And once you understand why each piece exists, the whole thing snaps into focus. Component 1, the substrate, your soil that costs nothing. Mushrooms do not grow in dirt. They grow in substrate, organic material rich in lignin and cellulose that mycelium, the fungal root network, breaks down and converts into fruiting bodies. The most productive substrates for high-yield species like oyster mushrooms are agricultural byproducts that most operations consider waste. Straw, hardwood sawdust, spent coffee grounds, cottonseed hulls, sugarcane bagasse. These materials are either free or pennies per pound from farms, coffee shops, and lumber operations that are already paying to dispose of them. This is the first inversion that makes the economics so strange. Your growing medium, the equivalent of the land in traditional farming, is a waste product someone else will often pay you to take. A single 5-pound block of pasteurized hardwood sawdust costs approximately 30 cents to 80 cents to produce from raw material. That block, properly inoculated and fruited, will yield 1.5 to 2.5 pounds of oyster mushrooms across 2 to 3 harvest cycles before it is spent. At $14 per pound retail, that is $21 to $35 in revenue from an 80-cent input. There is no other agricultural input to output ratio that looks like this. Component 2, the spawn, the seed that multiplies itself. Mushroom spawn is mycelium, the living fungal network, colonizing a grain or sawdust carrier. It is the seed equivalent in this system, and it is where most beginners spend more money than they need to. You can purchase ready-made spawn from suppliers for $5 to $20 per pound. 1 pound of grain spawn will inoculate 5 to 10 pounds of substrate, producing multiple fruiting blocks. But here is what the suppliers would rather you not know. Spawn generates itself. Once you have a healthy culture, you can expand it indefinitely. A single culture of oyster mushroom mycelium on a petri dish can be used to inoculate grain, which colonizes, which inoculates more grain, which colonizes more substrate in a cascade that, managed correctly, means you never buy spawn again after your first purchase. This is what the experienced growers call going infinite. Your biological input cost approaches zero after the first 90 days. Component 3, the environment. A room, not a farm. Mushrooms fruit in response to environmental triggers. Drop the temperature. Increase fresh air exchange. Raise humidity. The mycelium interprets these shifts as the arrival of autumn, the signal to produce. This is the engineering core of the indoor system. You are simulating conditions that trigger fruiting, and you are doing it in a controlled space where you can do it year-round, on demand, on your schedule. For a small-scale operation, this means a fruiting chamber, which can be a modified grow tent, a spare bathroom, a converted chest freezer, a basement room held at 65 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit, 85 to 95% relative humidity, with fresh air exchange every few hours. An ultrasonic humidifier costs $30 to $60. A basic digital hygrometer to monitor humidity is $10. A small fan on a timer for air exchange is $15. A thermometer is $8. Total environmental control setup, under $100 for a starter fruiting chamber. At scale, a full room or converted garage, you add a mini split for temperature control and an automated humidification system. Call it $800 to $1,500 for a professional setup that runs with minimal daily intervention. The key insight here is what separates this from traditional farming at a fundamental level. You are not subject to seasons. You are not subject to weather. You are not waiting for spring or praying against drought. You are running a production schedule. 12 months a year, predictable yields, predictable harvest windows, the kind of certainty that outdoor farmers spend entire careers wishing they had. Component 4, the species selection, matching market to biology. Not all mushrooms are equal, and your species selection is a business decision as much as a biological one. Oyster mushrooms, Pleurotus austriatus, and related species are the starter crop for almost every serious indoor operation. They colonize fast, 10 to 14 days. They fruit aggressively. They tolerate a wide range of conditions. A beginner with basic technique will succeed with oysters. Their wholesale price runs $6 to $10 per pound. Retail $12 to $18. Lion's mane, Hericium erinaceus, is where margins get serious. This is the crop that chefs pay for. That specialty grocers stock at $20 to $30 per pound. That supplement companies buy for cognitive health formulations. It is more sensitive than oysters, requires tighter humidity management, lower CO2 tolerance, but the grower who masters it accesses a market with almost no domestic competition. Most lion's mane sold in American specialty grocery stores is imported from Asia. The local grower who shows up with fresh product has an immediate advantage. Shiitake, Lentinula idodes, is the reliable middle path. It commands strong retail pricing, $10 to $16 per pound wholesale, up to $25 retail, and has established demand in almost every food market in the country. It fruits more slowly than oysters, but stores better, giving you more flexibility in delivery timing. The advanced operator runs all 3 species in rotation, staggering inoculation schedules so that something is always fruiting, something is always ready to harvest, and cash flow is continuous rather than seasonal. You do not start with a converted warehouse. You start with a spare room and 1 species, and you learn the biology before you scale the infrastructure. Here is the actual sequence. Week 1, source your substrate. Contact local coffee shops and ask about spent grounds. Call a feed store about straw. Visit a sawmill about hardwood sawdust. In most American cities and towns, you can source your first 50 pounds of substrate for free within a week of trying. Week 2, pasteurize your substrate. This is the step that separates productive growing from contaminated failure. You are not sterilizing. You are eliminating competing molds while leaving the beneficial microbial community intact. A large pot, boiling water, and a cooler will accomplish this for small batches. At scale, a steam pasteurization setup using a 55-gallon drum and propane burner costs under $150 and handles 200 plus pounds per run. Week 3, inoculate. Mix spawn into cooled, pasteurized substrate. Pack it into bags or containers with filtered air exchange points. Specialized filter patches are available for pennies, or you can use polyfill stuffing from a craft store. Seal them. Move them to your colonization space, which can be any room held between 65 and 80 degrees Fahrenheit. A spare bedroom, a section of your basement, somewhere dark and stable. Weeks 3 through 6. Wait. The mycelium colonizes. The bags turn white with dense fungal growth. You do almost nothing during this period except monitor for contamination. Green or black patches that indicate competing molds have taken hold. If a bag contaminates, remove it immediately. Do not open it indoors. In a well-pasteurized batch, contamination rates should be under 10%. Week 6 to 8. Move colonized blocks to your fruiting chamber. Introduce the environmental triggers. Drop temperature to 65 degrees Fahrenheit. Spike humidity to 90% plus. Increase fresh air exchange. Within 3 to 7 days, pins form. Tiny clusters of mushrooms emerge from the surface of the substrate. This is the moment that converts every grower who sees it. The speed and density of growth is almost impossible to believe until you watch it happen. Day 10 to 14 of fruiting. Harvest. Oysters are ready when the caps are fully extended, but before the edges begin to wave and curl upward, cut the entire cluster at the base. Weigh it. Bag it. Refrigerate at 34 to 38 degrees Fahrenheit, and it will hold for 5 to 7 days. The block will rest for 7 to 10 days, then produce a second flush, then a third. Each flush is slightly smaller than the last. After 3 flushes, the block is spent, and becomes premium garden compost. Another product you can sell or use. Then you inoculate the next batch. And the cycle repeats forever, as long as you maintain your cultures and your environment. Let's build this out concretely, because the numbers are the point. A 16-block monthly production cycle, which is absolutely manageable in a dedicated spare room, looks like this. You inoculate 16 blocks every 4 weeks. Each block contains 5 pounds of substrate and costs you 60 cents in materials. Total substrate cost, under $10 per month. Each block yields an average of 1.8 pounds of oyster mushrooms across 2 to 3 flushes. 16 blocks times 1.8 pounds equals 28.8 pounds of mushrooms per monthly cycle at a blended price of $14 per pound, mixing wholesale restaurant accounts with direct farmers market sales. 28.8 pounds times $14 equals $403 per month from 16 blocks. Now scale to 100 blocks per month, still manageable in a single dedicated room with vertical shelving. That is 180 pounds of mushrooms at $14 per pound equals $2,520 per month. Add a lion's mane rotation. 20 blocks per month yielding 1.2 pounds each at $22 per pound retail. That is another $528 per month. Total, $3,048 per month from one room. Over $36,000 per year. Add a second room, a garage, a basement section. The math scales linearly. The only limits are your labor, your markets, and your ambition. Operations running 500 to 1,000 blocks per month, which require a dedicated space, roughly the size of a 2-car garage, and 2 to 3 employees. Regularly report $80,000 to $200,000 in annual revenue with healthy margins, because their primary input is free waste material. These are not theoretical projections. These are numbers published by the specialty mushroom growers who have no reason to hide them, who share them in forums and grower networks because the market is large enough that more producers do not threaten them. The United States imports the majority of its specialty mushrooms. Domestic production cannot keep up with demand. Every farmer's market, every independent restaurant, every food co-op is a potential account waiting for a local grower to show up. Here is the part most growers underestimate, and it is the part that determines whether this becomes a side income or a primary income. Restaurants are your highest volume account. A single mid-tier restaurant with a chef who cooks seasonally will buy 10 to 30 pounds of specialty mushrooms per week if you can supply consistently. Lock in 2 or 3 restaurant accounts, and you have a production floor that justifies scaling. The approach is direct. Bring a sample pound of lion's mane or a mixed oyster variety tray to a chef. Do not call ahead. Walk in during afternoon prep, never during service. Ask for 2 minutes. Let the product speak. Chefs who work with commodity, produced from distribution warehouses, recognize fresh, local mushrooms immediately. The conversion rate for quality samples is extraordinarily high. Farmers markets are your highest margin channel. Retail pricing of $14 to $22 per pound is standard in any urban or suburban market. The visual impact of fresh mushroom clusters, particularly the dramatic blue-gray oyster fans or the white cascading lion's mane, sells itself. Customers stop. They ask questions. They come back. Most growers who establish a regular farmers market presence report selling out within the first hour of operation once they build a customer base. The bottleneck is production, not demand. Specialty grocers and co-ops sit between wholesale and retail pricing. Expect to negotiate $9 to $14 per pound for consistent weekly supply contracts. The advantage is volume and predictability. The disadvantage is thinner margins and more demanding consistency requirements. Direct-to-consumer subscription boxes are the growth channel that smart operators are moving into now. A $45 monthly mushroom subscription box, 2 to 3 pounds of mixed specialty varieties plus a recipe card, delivered to 50 customers, generates $2,250 per month in predictable revenue before you sell a single pound through any other channel. Build a subscriber base of 100 households, and you have covered your operating costs before the farmers market weekend or the restaurant delivery even runs. Month 1. Setup. Sourcing substrate. Building your pasteurization system. Ordering initial spawn. Configuring your fruiting chamber. Cost. $300 to $800, depending on starting infrastructure. Month 2, first inoculation runs. First colonization, first contamination lessons. Every grower contaminates some early batches. This is tuition. Each failed block teaches you something about technique, about pasteurization thoroughness, about spawn rate. Your contamination rate drops with every cycle. Month 3, first real harvest, first sale. The first time you hand someone mushrooms, you grew from waste material and watch them hand you cash. Something shifts. This is no longer theoretical. Months 4 through 6, refinement. You are dialing in your humidity, your fruiting triggers, your harvest timing. You are developing restaurant relationships. You are finding your market mix. Production is still small, but the operation is coherent. You know what you are doing. Month 6 to 12, scale. You add blocks. You add a species. You add a market channel. Revenue is real and growing. The operation has its own rhythm. Year 2 and beyond. You are not managing a project anymore. You are running a production business from your own property with startup costs you recovered in the first 4 months. The substrate is still free. The spawn regenerates itself. The markets are established. The only variable is how much you choose to produce. Most guides will tell you about the biology, the fruiting conditions, the substrate ratios. They will not tell you about the deeper structural advantages of this system, the ones that make it different from every other income source you have been told to pursue. This system is recession-proof. When money gets tight, people do not stop eating. They stop eating at expensive restaurants and start cooking premium ingredients at home. Farmers market mushroom sales historically increase during economic downturns. The customer who used to order lion's mane risotto at $28 per plate starts buying the mushrooms direct for $18 and making it herself. Your revenue does not collapse. It redirects. This system is inflation-proof. Your primary input is waste. When grain prices rise, your substrate costs nothing. When energy costs rise, a well-insulated fruiting room with a small mini-split barely registers on your electricity bill. The inputs that inflation attacks are largely irrelevant to this system. This system builds biological capital. Every culture you develop, every strain you refine, every productive genetics you isolate from high-performing blocks becomes permanent intellectual and biological property. Professional growers who have spent a decade selecting for aggressive colonization speed, high biological efficiency, and superior flavor profiles possess something that cannot be purchased at any price. Their cultures are worth more than their equipment. This system requires no permission. In most jurisdictions in the United States, growing mushrooms indoors is entirely unregulated at the production level. You are not farming land. You are not raising animals. You are not triggering the permits, zoning requirements, inspection regimes, or regulatory oversight that conventional agriculture involves. When you scale to commercial sales, cottage food laws, farmers market vendor licensing, and basic business registration apply. Straightforward processes in virtually every state. But the growing itself, a spare room, and the right biology, no one needs to approve that. In 475 BC, Fan Li documented a system that fed families for centuries because it worked in alignment with what biology already wanted to do. He did not fight nature. He partnered with it. He created conditions for life to produce abundantly, and then he stepped back and harvested the surplus. The indoor mushroom system is the same logic applied to the 21st century. Mycelium wants to colonize. It wants to fruit. It has been doing so for 700 million years, longer than any other organism on Earth, and it is extraordinarily good at it. Your role is not to force it. Your role is to create the conditions where its natural drive to produce becomes your harvest. What you are building is not just an income stream, although it is that, and a remarkable one. What you are building is independence from systems that can fail, from supply chains that can break, from employers who can downsize, from markets that can crash, from land you do not own and may never own, a spare room, a few $100s, the biology that has fed human civilizations since before recorded history. 10 years from now, when the people around you are anxious about food costs, about job security, about the fragility of systems they depended on without ever questioning, you will walk into a temperature-controlled room full of cascading mushroom clusters, harvest your weekly yield, drive it to your restaurant accounts and your farmer's market, and deposit money that your spare room generated while you slept. Not the loud kind of freedom that announces itself on social media. The quiet kind. The kind that doesn't need to. The biology is already waiting. The question is whether you are ready to use it. If something in this video opened a door for you, if you can see what this actually is, subscribe so you don't miss the next system we uncover. Share this with someone who is done waiting for permission. The knowledge is here. The room is waiting.